Hello everyone, this video is on Sega's Virtua racing game, and what we have here is a complete stand-up single player game all laid out on a test bench. And in order to save some space and get rid of the big bulky CRT, I have just a LCD display there, and this converter board, which is available on the internet from many different places. It has like two different part numbers. 8200 is what this one is. This converts RGB and negative composite sync coming in into standard VGA or medium resolution VGA, which is what this game is. And so the first thing I'm going to do is tell you about how to set this board up properly, because it does have settings that need to be right in order for the game to be displayed. And then I'm going to walk you through a lot of different settings you would make on this game if you own one. And so when I talk about this board, there's a button called switch, and then there's the menu button and the up and down. So when I refer to those names in just a minute, that's what I'm talking about, pushing those buttons. Alright, so the first button on that little converter board I was talking about it just has SW or switch. When I press that switch button, it's going to different inputs, RGB, HV. I'll press it again, and it's the YPB, RP or PR. And so what I'm saying is, if you first turn this whole thing on and you have no signal, hit that switch button and get it to the right input that's coming from your game boards. And so I hit the switch button again, and now it'll select that input where the game board signal's coming in. Alright, so there you go. Now, with the right input selected, which you need, you have to be on the right input to see the video game. I'm going to unplug the video input coming off the game board, the game stack, so that converter board loses signal. So now I got no signal, but I'm on the right input, and that's important because when I bring up the menu button, if you're not on the right input, geometry doesn't work. When I go up to geometry, I can't select it. But I brought up the menu by clicking on the menu button. Alright, I didn't select anything quick enough, so it went away. I'll hit the menu button again and bring that up, and then the up and down arrows let you go up and down the menu. Now I go to the first one and then hit menu again, and I select the picture menu, and here's all of the different settings. And note how I'm currently set. This works good for this monitor and this game, so take note of those settings. I didn't select something fast enough, so it went away. Alright, so I have to select menu again and get up there to where the picture is and hit menu again. And now if I want to select one of these, like let's say the contrast, I go to it up and down and then hit menu, and it turns yellow. Now up and down will adjust this number, and when I've got it adjusted right, hit menu and it goes back to white. If I want to get out of this, go down to return and hit menu, and it backs you up to the main menu. Alright, so let me go to up and down keys. There's up, and now I'm going to select menu to geometry. Take note of these geometry settings. This seems to work good for Virtua Racing board stack. Okay, didn't select anything quick enough, so it dropped out. Let me get the menu back up. You saw geometry there, so let's look at display. That you have to tinker with. It all depends on what display you have. This one's a 800 by 600, but you can select any one of those. And then to get out of here, okay, and then we got language, and those are your choices. So of course we want English, and there you go. That's all the different settings that you'll want to set this thing up. And so now what I'll do is I'll plug my video back in coming off the game board stack, and you should see the video game here as soon as I get the connector lined up. Okay, and there's the video game. Right, so those settings seem to work pretty good on that little board for this game. Now I'm going to start showing you some of the features here. What I did was I set up your service and test switch and the volume control here, and then for the accelerator and brake pedal I just took those potentiometers and mounted them up here. Got the steering assembly. So I'm going to get back on the monitor here and I'm going to press the test button like you would on the video game with the coin door open. You reach in the coin door and press test and it goes to this, the test menu. Alright, so let's see what we have. When you get into this menu, then you're going to push, it tells you to push these different, either red or green, or sometimes you press the start button, and so we'll see that come up here. And the first thing we're going to see is right here on exit, the red button, the red view will select. So red goes through here. I'm hitting red, red, red. I'm going to stop on the first one, bookkeeping, and then the green view button will select where that is. So I go here, and this is telling me how many times coins have gone through the chute and how many hours the game's been on. And so red view button goes to another page to see more stuff, total game plays, and I can just cycle back and forth between those two things. Green gets me out of this menu. So now I'll go down to the next thing here, game system. So red moves down one, green selects it, and then red cycles through all of these. And what I'm going to do is come down to here, coin setting, and then hit the blue or yellow to go up or down through choices. And blue, which is down one, is free play. So I'm going to put it on free play. And then you could select the color of the car. If you want multiple players, if they're linked together, the majority vote gets to pick which of the three tracks. Whether or not you have it linked or not linked. Race mode can either be normal or Grand Prix, which is like a 20-minute race. It's very long. So normal, what country? Japan, I'm going to change that to US, so you see USA or English letters on the monitor. This is a normal 4x3 monitor, but you could have the Deluxe cabinet, which has got the widescreen monitor, and we have a normal monitor here. What cabinet style is this? A two-player twin sit-down game, or the upright, which this is, or the standard, or the special? The special is their word for the Deluxe sit-down with the airbags in the seat, and so that's what the special cabinet is. We just want the regular upright cabinet. And then difficulty, I think this is how much time you get in between those time bonus flags, when you get more time. I got easy, hardest, I'll just put it on the easiest. Okay, and then I go down to exit and hit the green button to select this. And then all those changes I just made, if I hit the green button right now, I'm going to lose all those changes. I have to hit the red button, get up to, yes, I want to save these, and then hit green, and it says that it's saving those changes. All right, now input test. I'll go down here and I'll select input. And then if I had coin gear hooked up to this, which I don't, you could test that. There's the test switch, there's the service switch. See, I'm pressing the service switch. You see this go off and on. I press service, press service. I'm going to press the blue view button. You see that? The yellow blue button. You see that? I hit the start button. Okay, now I've got my accelerator pedal. Right now it's at minimum, and it can go all the way to FF, full swing, 0 to FF. The brake pedal, same thing. The handle is your steering wheel, and its center position is 80. And so right now, steering wheel's in the center, and just a reminder, I'm talking about hitting the red button, the green button, that's all of those. So watch what happens when I move this steering wheel. Okay, and then get back here and look. All right, you see this going. So when my steering wheel's at center, it should say 80. Steer it all the way left, it goes down to 21. If I steer all the way right, it goes up to about DD or DE. And there is, in the manual, it tells you what the range of that should be. So in other words, if you don't get 21, that may be okay. Maybe yours will go down a little lower than 21. Maybe it'll stay up at 25 or even higher. But What I'm saying is read your manual and it'll tell you what acceptable ranges are for all of these, even the gas and the brake. Shift up and down, okay, that's that yellow handle behind the steering wheel, or the paddle, behind the steering wheel. All right, so there's one more here that there's something you need to know about this. If here in the input test you don't have 80, even when your steering's at center, so in other words, what I'm saying is, come and look around the back here, this steering is centered right here. This is kind of a heart-shaped cam, and then this is a bearing that falls into it, and there's two very strong springs down here. So watch when I move the steering wheel. See how that's moving this lever arm away? And then when I let go of the steering wheel, okay, this spring pulls it back in. So this is how the center is detected or kept on the steering wheel when you're not holding it. But now notice that there's two potentiometers, one up high and one down low. If you do not have 80 when you really are centered, when this is really centered here, if the screen doesn't read 80 on the input test, you need to loosen these screws and adjust the potentiometer so that this potentiometer changing will change this number. And so it's important that this is adjusted properly to read 80. If it's jumping all around or making really crazy numbers or is dead altogether, you might have a bad potentiometer and have to replace it. So after you're done here in the input test mode, I hit the green button to get back to the main menu, and I'll hit the red button to go down one to the output test and select it with the green button. And the first thing you see is something that shows this pattern on your monitor if you want to check your monitor. I hit the red button and there's your color bars, and if you had a monitor, you want to have bright colors here and very dark colors here, which this is about pretty where it should be. And you would make all kinds of monitor adjustments if you had a lot of bleed or the colors weren't right. And so that's all happening here. And I will now lamp test is making these flash. Okay, so that's what the lamp test does. And then I'll hit the red button again and go back. So see, you cycle through this screen, and the lamp test. So to get out of here, hit the green button, green to escape, and then down to drive board. I'm going to red button go down and green button select. Okay, now this is the next one you want to pay close attention to. It says dip switches and they're all to off. Well, once again, you'll have to read your manual because what it'll tell you is the following. This has force feedback. This motor is causing friction on here. And what happens is we're talking about this board here. Now there's something to note right off the bat. This board is in your single upright game. This board is also in the twin sit down. And it is two or duplicate boards. And so if you had a two-player sit-down game, one half would be running the force feedback steering for one player, and the other half runs the force feedback for the other player. But because this is a single upright game, you will notice that here these displays, and the display, these left two numbers are for one player, and these two displays are for another player. Well, I only have one player hooked up here. It's a single stand-up game. So what this flashing means is that it can't detect the other player, which is proper. So the numbers really don't mean anything, but this will flash and that's normal. When everything's working properly in a one-player game, this will say 80. Once again, the center position of the steering wheel. If I had a two-player game, they would both say 80 if they were both adjusted properly. But now here on this display, if you're sitting, like I was just talking a minute ago, if you were sitting here in the center position, all right, well, let it get to center. Okay, now I'm at center. If this does not say 80, then you have to adjust these screws down here, or loosen these screws and adjust the potentiometer, turn the wheel, and so there's a pot down there, and if this is making really crazy numbers or flickering all around, or if it's dead, then it could be this potentiometer. But watch, when I move the steering wheel, I'll move the steering wheel now and watch that number. Okay, so I'm going all the way, let me get a better grip on it. Okay, there's all the way left, it went down to about 22, and now I'll go all the way right, and goes out to about DF. So see, it's really close to what the input did, and I'm going to let it come back to 0, or centered, and it stabilizes out. All right, so once again, remember that to adjust this to 80, it's the bottom one on the drive board test, and then this upper one is for the input test. But I was talking at first about all of these off buttons or switches. So you come over here and there's two sets of dip switches, and they are both off. Well, remember, they're for 2 players. So for just 1 player, you have to check your manual. I forget which one is the player for a single player game. But what these switches do is it's a digital code, like a binary code, that the more you turn on, the harder and harder this force feedback works. So if you're playing it and you've got the force feedback, but it really doesn't feel very strong to you, you want it to feel stronger, you would read your owner's manual about how to set this up and turn more switches on to get more force on that. And opposite of that is if you have too much force, like let's say you have a little kid playing it and it's ripping, the force feedback is ripping the steering wheel out of the kid's hand, then you can come here and what I have is they're all set to off, and even off, that's the weakest amount of force, it still runs it just fine, and you still feel some amount of force there. So the other thing you need to know about this is if I make any dip switch settings, I'll see these go to on, but that doesn't mean it's instantly set to that. You have to cycle power on all the boards, and as it boots up, then it reads that, and you'll get that different amount of force. Okay, so then next we have some things here. It says spring, clutch, centering, left roll, and right roll. And so what those are for, and the way you select them, is by pressing the start button. So watch, I'll press the start button. Well, right now I'm on spring, or this asterisk is next to spring, and that means that this spring that's in here on the steering wheel is what's centering me. I'm under spring tension. But when I hit the start button, watch what happens to that asterisk. It moves down to clutch. So now that I'm pressed this and I'm on clutch, watch what happens. If I turn this, it stays there. See, it's not going back. So it's just testing that your clutch is working. Go like this. Okay, clutch is working because it's staying there. Now, before I go any further, I should explain what that clutch is all about. When this game is running, you've got a clutch here, you've got this motor, and the motor is turning a belt. There's a black belt in here, and it turns it, and it's turning it around this clutch. But the clutch is an electronic type clutch where different voltage levels put on the clutch will cause the clutch to grab more or grab less. And so when that clutch grabs, that's what grabs the steering wheel. And so here that clutch is grabbing the steering wheel, and that's why it stays. But now watch what happens. I'm going to hit my start button, and I'm going to go from clutch to centering, and look at this. Okay, what it's doing now is, and I'm on centering, it's showing me that if I go off of center, watch, I'm going to take this just a little bit and go off of center to the right, and watch the motor. It instantly starts turning, and this clutch is grabbing to bring it back to center. When I bring it back to center, it stops. Now watch, I'll go with the steering wheel, I'll go left in the opposite direction, and that belt spins in the opposite direction now, trying to recenter it. So that's what centering does. No matter which way I go, it tries to bring it back to center. And the force I feel on the steering wheel is all because there's voltage being put on this clutch, which is transferring, grabbing that, and putting it onto the gear that's through the shaft that the steering wheel is attached to. Okay, so that's centering. If I take it off of here, yeah, it wants to pull it back. Take it off of here, it wants to pull it back. All right, now then if you notice, I have uncentered next, which that just means if I go to uncentered, Okay, I'm center here, but as soon as I go off, oh, it grabs it and tries to push it that way. See? If I come back to center, it stops. But if I go off center the other direction, oh, that motor kicks in and tries to uncenter it. Okay, so it's just different tests on that clutch and motor. Now watch this one. I got a roll left and a roll right. So if I click the start button, I'm going to go to roll left. That's it. And it's going to keep doing that, keeping it rolled left. Press the start button again. It's going to go to roll right. What do you think is going to happen to the wheel? Oh, slams are pretty quick. So when you switch from left to right, if you don't want this thing slamming, then you might want to hold it between the roll left and roll right, otherwise it's going to slam. And then I was in roll right and I pressed the start button one more time, and where does it go? Back to spring, and that just turns the motor off and it'll let the spring get it back to center. So that's everything about the handle drive test. Now it does have some other things down here, and they look like they have something to do with the shift, but I've called a guy that worked at Sega and who knows all about these test screens, and he says they never did anything with this. So really the only thing you're looking for here is what switch setting you want for the amount of force, and that all of these are working properly. All right, I'll hit the green button to get back out of here. Or no, this is the one exception. To get out of this, I have to push the test switch. So that's the test switch inside the coin door. That gets me back. And now I can go to the sound one next. And there is just all kinds of different sounds here. I've got 3 different menus. The red button selects through the menus, and then the start button selects it. And I got my speakers back there, and so let's go. I don't know. Tire gun. What's that one? Okay. Let me hit red and get over to some of these other ones. Here's waiting for the coin. Okay, I hit the green button to back out of that. So you can see how many different sounds you can test. After the sound test, there's TPG. Don't remember what that stands for, or TGP. Let's select it. Test those 4 integrated circuits, IC 57, 58, 60, 66. Okay, and then memory test. If I select this and hit the green button, this is going to take a while, and it is normal for the screen to do some goofy things coming up, you'll see. But it's going through and testing all of the chips on, I think they're the ROM or PROMs on the memory board. This is the board number where the ICs exist. And now here coming up, notice that all of a sudden the screen goes goofy. This is normal. You have to wait for it. It's actually going through and I guess checking some of the EPROMs or PROMs that have to do with video. So while it's testing these, your video goes goofy. But notice now when it comes back from that, we didn't, it just said 2 goods, and then we had to wait for all that gibberish, and now they all say good. So it was testing all the rest of those. And then green to escape. And down here, backup memory and clear. If I clear that out, it clears out like the game time and how many games have been played, how many coins are put through the chute, stuff like that. So I'm going to clear the memory out, not that I needed to. And that's all the test menu. So go down here to exit and press green, and it says exit, and then it'll come up one more time and show me the main menu with settings, which is this one right here. That's how I'm set up. And then it'll come back up and start the game. If you're trying to troubleshoot your Virtua Racing and it will not boot, the most simplest boot up you're trying to get and it won't happen, one of the things you need to do is make sure that this board has all of the proper signals going to it and power. So this is the main game stack and the video board on it, and communications board for linking them together, this memory board, and then the bare minimum for this game to boot up would be to have this complete and working, and to have a good working I/O board. So this board's called the input-output or I/O board, and it has to be completely working, as well as it has to have all the right power to it. And so what I'm saying is the rest of these boards could be unplugged or be bad, wiring harness could have problems, but as long as this board is good and this board is good and they're talking to each other, then the game will boot up. And so one of the things you know, or a way to tell whether or not it's properly booting up, is there are two LEDs on the I/O board. So this one should always be on because that means it's got power, but notice this LED is off, and that's correct for when it's working. When the LED is off, it means you have good communication between the game stack and the I/O. But over here, this is where that communication takes place, and I'm going to unplug it, and watch this red light when I unplug this. I'll get it here eventually. There you go. Okay, when I unplugged it, notice this light came on. All right, it's already booted up, but if I were to cycle power, this game would not boot up right now. In other words, I have a screen, my video output's working and it's running, but if I were to boot it up again without communication, in other words, I got that red light on, it's not going to boot up. All right, so here I just cycled power, and you see I got my red light on my game stack. That means that's got power. I got power on my I/O board. Oops, sorry, get over here. Power on my I/O board, but that red light on the I/O board means no communication. And without the game booting up, all you get's a blue screen. So currently, the game is powered off. And I'm going to plug the game into power. It's going to boot up, and you'll hear the motor start running, and you'll see the steering wheels turn. So that's all automatic as part of the boot up sequence, and watch what happens. The wheel starts turning little at a time left. What it's doing is it's checking the clutch and how much voltage it needs to put on that clutch until we get all the way to full left, and then it stops. Now it checks the clutch in the other direction, and it'll run this wheel till it maxes out to the right, and then it'll stop. And I believe it's taking note of those values, how much voltage it had to put in, but not really sure. Maybe it's just checking that it's working, period. But this is the normal startup sequence for a Virtua Racing, and now it's checked both directions. And here's another thing. Okay, remember I said how you have to, or the right-hand side, there's nobody hooked up, it's just a single player. Notice that I'm not flashing yet. It goes through that startup sequence of left and right steering, and then about a minute later, a minute and 15 seconds there, now it starts flashing. For some reason, and it's kind of weird, but I did verify this. If you power this up and you don't wait until this thing starts flashing, wait your minute and a half or so after power up. If I'm still within that 1.5 minute window and this hasn't started flashing yet, then if I hit my test button and go into that driver board menu, let me show you. So I go test, and then I'm going to hit red drive board. Okay, so to revisit this one, I'll go into the drive board menu, and remember when we press the start button and we can do all these things with that motor. I hit start button, here's the clutch, and I can do centering. Hear the motor running? The motor's running as I turn the steering wheel down here. And then I got it, the steering wheel's trying to roll to the left, now it's trying to roll to the right. Okay, you heard the motor running, and all this was working, but what I'm trying to say is that that only engages and works after you let this thing fully come up and you see these numbers flash. So if I would have powered it right up and went right into this menu and started playing with these things, the motor would be dead. It's just off and it doesn't work. And you think, well, maybe I have a problem with my motor or something. But you don't. I've done it multiple times repeatedly, and every time, if I wait until this starts flashing, now I can go into this test menu and everything works fine. So this isn't going to flash if you are working on a two-player sit-down game. A twin sit-down, you should have 80 and 80, but I don't know. I haven't tested on a twin. Do you still have to wait that minute and a half before you can go into this test menu? I don't know. The last thing to tell you about when you're checking your game is actually the first thing you should do before you do anything else, and that is check the output voltage of this power supply and this. There are two power supplies. Remember I said you need both of these two boards minimum for it to boot up? Well, in order for them to boot up, they need both power supplies because they're supplying different things. But there is adjustments on them to adjust the 5 volts. And you want to put a voltmeter on there and you want to adjust it right to about 5.0, 5.1. And where you want to test it is on the integrated circuits themselves, on the chips. You need to look up your IC chips and know which pins are power and ground, and that's the best place to go look right across the chip. Because you could be, just for an example, you could be like 5.2 volts coming out of the supply if you check it right here, but by the time you get to the board, you may be at only 5.0 or 5.1. You do have a little bit of tiny drop, and so it's best to make sure you got 5 volts on the board itself while you're adjusting. And then there are some custom integrated circuits. They're programmable logic devices, or gate array logic GALs or PALs they're called. And if they get more than about 5.3 volts on them, you could damage those chips, fry them. So you want to make sure that you're never over 5.1 or 2 on any of these boards. Okay, so let's show you a full test here on the test bench. I've got my test and service, my coin. This is my D-gauss, which doesn't do anything. And here's my accelerator and brake. I've set it up for free play, so I'm going to press the start button.
Select course by wheel and step on gas pedal.
Alright, so I can select which course, and to step on the gas pedal, I got to twist this.
To play manual 7 speed, holding start button, step to start.
Alright, so there I selected it.
3, 2, 1,
Alright,
go!
and here's my different views. So this is from in the cockpit. And look, in the cockpit, if I hit the shifter up and down, you see his hands move. Okay, that's that view. The yellow gives me that view, and green gives me a real bird's eye view way up in the air. So I'll hit the gas, and I feel the force feedback steering. Let me get down a little closer here in my view. All right, and I can stop and hit the brakes. So, hit the gas. Alright, and if I get too far off, I feel the steering wheel jerking my hand around. Alright, and I'm just going to play around with this. You can actually go reverse. I'm going to try to fool this thing. It tries to auto-correct you. It doesn't want you to go in the wrong direction, but you actually can get it to go reverse. Alright, so that's everything about the game on a test bench. This is my 4-player Virtua racing setup. I have a twin sit-down, a stand-up, and then the Deluxe model with the airbags. And they are all linked together so they can race each other. If you remember these games, whoever's in the lead, their car number would be flashing. So if car number 1 was in the lead, that light would be flashing. Car number 2, he'd be flashing. But that's only on the twin sit-downs. The stand-up one didn't have that feature. Now, if you notice, I've taken one from the twin sit-down, that's car number 3, and I've made it so that he actually will flash if he's in the lead. And the way I was able to do that is come back here, and in the back you've got, sorry, I got real dim lighting here, but this is the I/O board, and if you look at the schematics, where the signal to drive that flashing light, the car player number, comes out the bottom, and on the twin sit-down, it's all wired up to go to the player number lights. So what I had to do was I had to come in here, and I had to tap into where that signal exists, because even though this is the upright game, and I don't have that player number light, the signal's still here in the I/O board. So I tapped into it, and I brought it over to here, and this is one of those driver modules on a twin sit-down game. So it takes your 5 volts and turns on a solid state switch that then lets 110 volts AC go through to light up the regular light bulb inside that player number. And so this is from a twin sit-down, and I just put it in the single player upright. And then after that little driver board, it comes up and it drives the light bulb in there. So when car 3, 2, or 1 are in the lead, they all work properly. Now, whoop, it is 7 o'clock. Okay. The car number 4 light I put up there, but I was not able to get that one to flash. And the reason why is because when you have the Deluxe sit-down, all bunch of extra signals that would be available in these other games are used to run the airbags and to run all that electronics. So the thing I'm trying to say is that the signal that would drive that lamp is simply not there when you select that this is a Deluxe sit-down. And so that's just for appearance, but it won't flash if number 4 is in the lead. Here's another look at that solid state switch or solid state relay. And then this is where I bring in the 110 volts AC, and I made a little just schematic so that you can see how it works. And where that signal comes from on the I/O board is to the 50 pin connector, and it's pin 24A. That's the signal. And then that's the solid state relay board, which is that one right there. And then my toss link, or my optical cables that tie the 4 together, I just put in a black tube and got them up off the ground. So if kids are running around or anything, they won't get into those cables. So that's my 4-player Virtua Racing setup. Thanks for watching the video, and I hope you guys have a great day. Alright, so I thought I'd maybe show you guys it playing. Number 2's in the lead. Number 3.
more information, visit GameRoomRepair.com.